And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call. As tonight, your Indiana Hoosiers win 89-72 in their first-round matchup in the NIT over St. Francis. And the Hoosiers will now go on to play the winner of Providence and Arkansas. We don't know exactly when, although it did sound like it might be Thursday night. We will wait to see. But the Hoosiers, after a sluggish start in the first half, turn things around in the second half, get the win by about the margin most people expected that it would be. And we're going to break it all down for you in this edition of the Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and the coach, Brian Tonsoni. And let's start this edition of the Assembly Call the way we start every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And for the banner moment in this game, I'm going to go back to early in the second half because, that first half was terrible, and we'll talk about it. Indiana was down 40-34. Really, for the most part, had played like a team that didn't really have a whole lot of interest in being in the NIT. But to their credit, they really came out with a different mindset and a different approach in the second half. And so, the exact moment that I'm going to pinpoint here is at about the 17:38 mark of the second half. This was the fourth possession of the second half. Devante Green had missed a three. It was a good look, but he missed a three. Justin Smith with some nice hustle to tap out a rebound, kind of a Zach McRoberts type play by Justin Smith. Juwan Morgan grabbed it, went strong, really attacked the basket. It put Indiana up 43-42. Indiana would not give up the lead again. And the Hoosiers scored 9 points on those first four possessions by going inside. Even the threes that they took, they were inside-out shots. But the Hoosiers really came with an approach to get the ball inside, take advantage of their strengths and the weaknesses of St. Francis. It led to a 16-5 start to the second half, and it really kind of felt like Indiana cruised from there. Not that they didn't keep playing hard, but they kind of took control of the game and kept it. And what I really liked about what we saw there, in addition to what Juwan Morgan did, he kind of came out with a mindset that I'm going to dominate, and he did, and he was clearly the MVP for Indiana in that second half, as we'll talk about. But we saw a number of things from guys that we're going to need to see next year. We saw Rob Phinisee creating and having a much better defensive approach on the other end to shut down King, who had really burned Indiana in the first half. We saw Devante Green being patient, taking good three-pointers, not forcing things. As I mentioned, we saw Justin Smith hustling and being aware. Those are the type of plays that you see from him when he's locked in games like Michigan State, but are too few and far between, and we saw that. And so it was nice to see that at the start of the second half. It really marked a stark contrast to how Indiana played in the first half, and that's what propelled Indiana to the lead and ultimately to the victory to move on to the second round of the NIT. All right, tonight's Hoosier Proud banner moment brought to you, as always, by our friends at Hoosier Proud and Home Field. At homefieldapparel.com, you will find the comfiest and most unique licensed IU apparel that is available anywhere. And at HoosierProud.com, you'll find great state of Indiana-themed apparel while sending 10% of your purchase to causes around Indiana, like the Hoosier Veterans Assistance Foundation. Both brands were started by an IU grad, and all Hoosier Proud and Home Field apparel is designed and printed out of Indianapolis. And with the NCAA tournament and the NIT now in full swing, be sure to check out all of Home Field's officially licensed IU designs. And they've recently added a bunch of really fantastic new items. They've got a Tri-Blend Bison t-shirt. We've told you a lot about the hoodie, which has obviously been great for the winter, but now with the weather hopefully starting to improve, you can get the t-shirt so that you can wear that comfortable Tri-Blend material with the awesome vintage IU Bison logo year-round.
It's a big freaking deal.
It is a big freaking deal, as chat mobber Megan said. And in addition to the Bison tee, there is also a hoodie version of the Script Indiana design and a sweatshirt version of the Sneakers design.
Can a brother get some coupons?
You absolutely can. Use the promo code ASSEMBLY at checkout to get 15% off your order on either site. That's promo code ASSEMBLY at HoosierProud.com and HomeFieldApparel.com. All right, well, it is time to move the ball, find the open man, pound the ball inside the paint. Let's get some opening thoughts from the rest of our team. We will start with Andy Bottoms. Andy, your Bottoms line on, hey, finally a first-round NIT victory for us to cover here on the Assembly Call.
God, what a terrible sentence that was.
I know.
Yeah, that's not one you want to have kept in the holster for a while to get ready to.
No, it's not.
That's depressing.
No. Forget I said that.
Yeah, that was not your best work. Anyway, it was just that the first half was frustrating. You're playing a team that doesn't have any size. Their big guy got in foul trouble pretty early, and then IU, hurled up 13 threes and really took the shots that St. Francis wanted him to take, and it came out a little sluggish. Played well for a stretch. Got up 9 and then gave up 27 points over the last 9 minutes of the first half. It just looked really disengaged, seemed to kind of start to coast when they got up those 9 points. And, you certainly saw them come back out in the second half, concerted effort to really get the ball inside, drive the ball, because that was evident in the first half. Anytime they wanted to drive the ball to the basket or get the ball inside to Juwan or Duran or anybody, they could have done that whenever they wanted to. And I think they ended up with about 40 points in the paint, I believe, in the second half, or 38 or 40. I think that's 16 at halftime, finished with 56 for the game. And once they did that, they were able to really, take control of the game. And St. Francis for a while only scored on 3-pointers in the second half. They only made 3 2-point shots in the second half. For a while, they had only scored threes, maybe 5 straight baskets, but those were spread out, and the defense got a little bit better, and it really just took control. So solid game from Juwan Morgan with 28. The Wilson basketball apparently is the key to his success, and I thought Al Durham, I'm sure we'll talk about him, played really well, was just aggressive and took what the defense was giving. And I think that was something that in the first half IU got away from, allowed themselves to get sucked into a little bit more of an up-tempo game than probably what they wanted to play, and took some bad shots. And the one thing I will say in looking at the scores across the NIT, almost everybody who was seeded highly fell in the same boat. There was a lot of close games or teams losing at halftime. I think Clemson, NC State, even UNC Greensboro, I think was close early, and those were some of the teams that were top seeded. So not making excuses for IU by any means. That wasn't a good first half performance, but I do think as you look down the list of teams playing in this situation, there's a little bit of getting yourself working through a couple of things before you really get to a point where you're engaged in the game the way that you need to be. And hopefully IU's got that out of its system, because whoever they play next will be a tough one.
All right, and now we will go over to Coach. It's Tonsoni time. Coach, what's on your mind after this IU victory?
Well, I'm going to focus on Devante Green. I've been very critical of him most of the year, and I think tonight the way he played and the way he's played down the stretch has really been a boost for Indiana. And in the first half that was sluggish, I thought he was the one who really came to play. And I said this on Sunday when we were on the show. You like all these guys, but you can be critical of them at times, and so now's the time to be praising Devante. His numbers, he didn't make a lot of shots. He's 4 for 13, had 12 points, but the 6 assists to 1 turnover, or 6 assists to 2 turnovers, is an excellent 3-to-1 ratio for a guard. And he's added some 3-point shot ability down the stretch, and that's good to see. He's got another year. We hope that he's back and can provide some offense for the team next year. But I've been really pleased with his approach, and he hasn't been making lackadaisical passes. He's gotten beat a little bit on defense, but everyone does at times. I thought his attention on defense has been better lately, and so I thought this was one of his better games. We could all point to the game against Ohio State when he scored in the mid-20s, but tonight I thought he was I'm afraid to say calming part of IU for the first half. I don't think I just said that.
Things are so weird this season. Just say it.
And so I thought that he kept us in the game in the first half, and then Morgan takes over and Durham takes over in the second half. We get better efforts from the other guys in the second half. And the one thing I will say is that what we saw tonight has been indicative of the season, is a team that's got some talent, got some ability, but they're not self-starters. And that puts a lot of pressure on Archie and the staff to do that. When they get a big lead, they let down. When their backs against the wall in the Big Ten tournament, they don't play with ease and poise. So this team is who they are, and we're glad to still be playing.
Let's talk about Archie a little bit, because I thought overall this was a really well-coached game. And here's what I mean by that. I thought Archie had to be as nervous as everybody else, all Indiana fans, about how the team would come out and approach this game. And St. Francis jumped out to a 7-2 lead. He called a timeout immediately. And the guys really responded to it, went on a 9-0 run, I think, right after that, and kind of got control of the first half before they fell apart again. But I thought that was a real important early stretch, because if Indiana doesn't have that stretch and kind of the 5, 6, 7 minutes where they really played well in the first half, who knows what the deficit is. And I thought, at the end of the first half, it was interesting that he got that technical. It was kind of an oddly timed technical right before halftime, and the call was kind of questionable. But what I wondered is, him getting that, showing that fire before you go into halftime, does that then lead into some kind of fire and brimstone speech there at halftime? Or, whether he did that or whatever, he got the team turned back around for the second half, whether that was him or the leadership or whoever. And I thought they had a much better approach in the second half of pounding it inside. And I have to think that was the approach coming out in the game. And Indiana did that some, but Juwan Morgan missed 3 really easy layups in the first half, and we just settled too much. But I thought, and maybe part of it is, playing down, our offense tends to do a little bit better when we're playing down there by our own bench. But I just thought overall, Coach, that first half was so disappointing. But I thought Archie really kind of navigated the choppy waters well. Like in the second half, he stuck with guys a lot longer. He didn't play Deron Davis, who I thought was terrible in the first half. He had a shorter bench. He made sure that Zach McRoberts got out there early to get some energy. I thought in kind of a tough, tricky spot, I thought he led his team in a really strong way today, like on the court in some of those moments.
I tend to agree. I thought the early timeout was important as well. I think it was either 7-2 or 9-2, and he takes an early timeout, and then Indiana goes on a run to build that lead for a while until it was a 20-12 or 20-14, and then it turned back around. But I think it was a sign more of frustration than anything of trying to get the team going. You've had a team that's lacked a little of competitive fire. They've been up and down. You don't make the NCAA tournament. You come out at home in a game that you should be winning. You have to take a timeout early. You give up the lead late, and then you don't get a call. I think that just builds up for coaches as well as it builds up for players and fans too. And Archie just had enough at that point of everything in basketball. And I think he just went after the official, and we get that way as coaches. When you have to be the coach, the locker room police officer, you have to be the motivator, and you have to constantly take timeouts to get your team to play well, and then go in and make halftime adjustments to get your team to play well. That's your job, but the team and the program can be a lot better if you didn't have to do that. And I think that was just a sign of frustration, and probably good for him to get it out before halftime so he could go in measured and pick out the right words. And obviously you have to say that he did bring out the best in his team. And then kudos to the kids too, because it's tough when a coach gets mad at you at halftime and you're playing an NIT. You could say, hey, we can tank this and not play the rest of the year and go on a little bit of break. But they came back and responded. And that's a good thing to see too.
In a lot of ways, they followed Juwan Morgan's lead, who was pretty lackadaisical in the first half, not as focused as he usually is, and he was a much different player in the second half. But Andy, going back to Archie, your thoughts on his performance tonight?
Yeah, they had a couple quotes came out in the postgame. They asked him what he said at halftime. He said a lot of things that I can't say here, and did say the focus was really on getting the ball to Juwan, which was evident early on in the second half, and really even being able to get the ball into the paint off the drive was another one that, the way that St. Francis was playing their zone, they were so far extended. There was huge gaps in the middle where the guards could get in. And there were times again in the first half where they took advantage of that, but too long stretches where they just took the shots that St. Francis was willing to give them, and didn't do that in the second half. And not a surprise then that the results turned around. So I do think it's a difficult situation for a coach in that scenario where there's really, in IU's position in this, there's really nothing to gain and everything to lose if you show up and you don't play well, which with this team you're always at risk of. And I found myself saying that at halftime, thinking, why would any of us have believed that this team would, come out and really just drop the hammer on somebody in the first half, given their inability to come out and play the way they needed to in a much more meaningful game against Ohio State in the Big Ten tournament. So and I think as coach said, just who this team is at this point, and we can't be, we're 30 plus games in, can't be too surprised that there are long lapses where the team doesn't do the things that everybody knows that they need to do in order to be successful. And they turn that around, and hopefully, they've kind of gotten over that initial disappointment or whatever you want to call it of, hey, we're not playing tonight where we wish that we were. And so hopefully they got that out of their system, because presumably they would play Providence in the next game, given that Gafford is sitting out for Arkansas, which wish he'd done in November or December, whenever that game was. But I would imagine they'll play Providence, who's a really tough team, and Ed Cooley is a really good coach. So if that is how it plays out, I don't think you're going to be able to survive the kinds of lulls that they had in the first half. Although I also don't know that they're going to be able to make a run against the Providence team the way like they did in the first half against St. Francis. That really, I thought, allowed them to relax, and Archie did a good job of reining it back in when he needed to. And I think you saw him give some guys an opportunity to play in the first half that didn't really seize that opportunity, and thus didn't get much of a chance to get on the court in the second half.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, if we have another first half like this, we're going to get bounced in the next game. I guess, coaches, you and I were talking about before we started, at least now you have that good second half. You get this 17-point win. You build a little bit of confidence. Like, you're in the tournament now. You're like you've broken an NIT sweat. And so I feel like they'll be a better opponent. I'm not really sure what to expect from the crowd, second NIT game, but it's a bigger opponent, on a Thursday night when there's other NCAA tournament games. It'll be interesting to see what kind of crowd there is. But, the thing with the NIT is it's a bunch of flawed teams in a bracket, so all of these teams are in the NIT because they have flaws. Now, the flaws are different. Maybe Providence plays, more consistently for 40 minutes than we do, but we've probably got the better individual players than they do, so whose flaws are worse? That's you just have to outlast other people's flaws. Tonight, Indiana's flaws were really apparent in the first half, Coach. And, in the second half, they put those aside and really played to their strengths. And it's amazing. Now, look, St. Francis is not good. They're horrible defensively. They're 330th on defense. So everything we did in the second half is exactly what we should do. But it is always nice to see when this team actually asserts itself on offense and does what it's good at, because there's too many games where we drift through offensively and don't do that.
Well, and you could also say the same thing defensively. The score at halftime, giving up 40 points at halftime, 40-34. And I know there are some technical free throws there at the end, but that's not a great performance tonight either. And one of the things you worry about with approach is defense. You could have the right approach and have a bad offensive night because the ball's just not going in, or the other team's defending a team in a certain fashion. But the one consistent should be game to game is your defensive effort and intensity. And it was there in the second half, but it wasn't there in the first half. So, yes, this team has had lulls on both ends of the floor at various points of the season, and that's not gonna help you win a couple more games. But, anytime you're in a tournament, you go to the Big Ten tournament and the teams play shaky for a while, and the teams that can shake that off earlier seem to do better. Ohio State versus Indiana in that game. But you'll see it in the NCAA tournament too. You'll see the favorites. The underdogs will hang around for a while until they get, we've always talked in tournaments, it's always good to get the favorite in the sectional, high school sectional on the first night when they're a little tight and worried about playing. But once that sweat is broken, a team that's locked in will play better. This team has always been up and down in the locked in department, in the mental approach department. And so you got to flip a coin. But if they're locked in, then you'll see some elimination of some of those struggles tonight. If they're not, they'll continue.
Yep. All right, coming up as we continue our breakdown of Indiana's 17-point victory over St. Francis, I'll point out tonight's meaningful moment you might have missed, and then we will go inside the numbers to highlight some of the most important statistical notes from the game. You are listening to the Assembly Call. Stick with us. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and the coach Brian Tonsoni, and we are breaking down Indiana's 89-72 victory over St. Francis in the first round of the NIT, and it is now time for tonight's meaningful moment that you might have missed. One I wanted to point out real quick, Coach, and it kind of goes back to something that you said about Devante. I was really impressed at the very end of the game when Devante was in with some of the bench guys. He had a couple of opportunities to force a shot and didn't, and really seemed committed to getting Clifton or Jake the ball, and ended up getting Jake the ball in a nice position where Jake could dunk it. And I just thought, little subtle sign of maturity from Devante Green, because I feel like at times he would have forced that shot. In this case, it was like he was playing upperclassman point guard and getting some other guys involved. That was really nice to see from him. But the moment that I want to point out, and this is going to lead us into talking about this guy, because I thought he really played well tonight, in, frankly, a matchup that was tailor-made for him to play well, but it was Al Durham. And it's a few minutes after the banner moment that I mentioned earlier where Indiana really came out and, just played so much better at the start of the second half. But at the 15:48 mark, and they did, kind of highlight this in the broadcast, but just him hustling in transition. Devante threw a really bad alley-oop to Justin Smith on a 3-on-1 break. And Devante in the open court was not good tonight. Some of his decisions, when he was going to the basket, just not good. And that, really had no chance for Justin to make that. We missed it. But because Al sprinted and hustled just down the court quicker than everybody else, he gets the rebound, gets the bucket. It's 48-42 Indiana. And, obviously Indiana is rolling. And the reason that I picked that play out is because it's just indicative of the kind of guy that Al is, because he struggles at times with his confidence, shooting, his confidence offensively, being willing to drive to the basket. Andy, we've talked about it a lot. And sometimes I think he struggles with his confidence defensively, but he never struggles with his effort. Like, that guy gives you 100% every time. And we saw it again here. And, I think one of the reasons for optimism as you look toward next season is that a guy like Al Durham, as he becomes an upperclassman and his body develops more and his confidence develops more, and he's now in his third time around going through some of this stuff, and his skills are getting better because his shot is getting better, you combine that with the approach that he brings to the game, the guy's going to be a good Big Ten player. He may never be an all Big Ten player. He may always be a little inconsistent with his scoring, but that guy's going to be a good player. And tonight, we saw a guy who, again, in a matchup tailor-made for him, every time there was an opportunity for him to drive, he took it. And so, I want to praise him for that hustle on that play, but also just overall his approach tonight. He was one of the guys in the second half. If you couldn't get it inside to Juwan, then he was just going to take it himself. And he even did it in the first half some when other guys weren't. So I thought this was a really good game for Al. And I think this NIT, in terms of how important this can be for individuals, I think this tournament has a chance to be a real nice springboard for him into next season, because I anticipate a really nice junior season from him.
Well, I think he really benefited a lot from Romeo not playing and being able to have the ball a little bit more. We've talked about some of that when those guys are playing together versus when Romeo's on the bench. Al, I think, feels more comfortable trying to be more aggressive offensively, and he ended up 6 of 8 on twos, made 3 threes, and did a nice job. In the way that St. Francis was trying to defend Juwan Morgan, they would often get themselves in situations where Juwan could just seal them off and open up a driving lane, and Al took advantage of that for a few of his baskets in the second half in particular. But that all took part from him really looking inside first, and then a good job by Juwan of sealing those guys off and giving him lanes to the basket, because once he got by the first, the top of the defense, he was able to really get to the basket and finish pretty well. Once he got there, hit some nice threes, and I think that that hustle play that you mentioned was indicative of the kind of plays that IU wasn't making in the first half, where St. Francis was the one that was really making those kinds of plays in the first half and really just outworking IU in a lot of ways, where they got caught flat-footed and standing around. And I think that was emblematic of what they were able to do and being more of the aggressor, and a good performance for him. And we don't know, if Romeo will be able to play. Archie said after the game that even if it had been an NCAA tournament game, he wouldn't have been able to go. I don't know whether that's really true or not. We'll never know. But I thought, to the extent that Romeo's out, this is a huge opportunity for Al. And I think, again, you look at his year-over-year improvement, even his improvement within this season from beginning to end, I think he's on a good trajectory. And if you're looking for storylines, guys to follow, whatever you want to call it for the NIT, and kind of trying to make the most of what this could mean for this team, he's definitely a guy that you look at and try to figure out, because there are minutes to be had next year in the backcourt and on the wing. And if he can continue the ascension that he's had to this point, I think he's setting himself up well to be a beneficiary and a really big part of this team next year.
Yeah, that's a good point, Andy, about him taking advantage of Romeo not being there. And by the way, I would say at this point, we have zero reason to not give Romeo the benefit of the doubt on all of the reasons that have been publicly stated about why he's not playing, his injury, all of that. So we'll just take it game by game and see. But, I think Al has been hindered a little bit by kind of being a one-dimensional offensive player when Romeo's in the game, because he just basically has to be a floor spacer and three-point shooter. And he can do that. He's improved at it. But he's so much better when he can be multi-dimensional and use his driving to the basket. Now, he's nowhere near as good as Romeo at getting to the basket and finishing. I mean, maybe 50% is good, but it's a strength of his, and it feels like he can play a much more natural game for himself when he's able to do that like he was today, Coach.
Yeah, and against games like this and the games against Illinois where there are more driving opportunities, even against the zone tonight, there were driving opportunities as they swung the ball around and sealed the middle, as Andy was talking about. But that's the way good offense is designed. What the problem with Indiana is that the lack of shooting has really hurt players besides Juwan, sagging in on Juwan, and then no driving lanes for Romeo, and even L, even though he's a spacer there's been no room to drive because everyone is two steps off, daring people to shoot. And tonight, what you saw against the zone when they played zone, and even against man-to-man tonight was, and it's a bad defense, so you're able to take advantage of it. And what you try to do as a coach is to put players in a position to make the right decisions. I thought L was really decisive tonight.
Yeah.
And maybe that comes from that confidence that you were talking about. And confidence is so important in a player to believe in his game, believe in what's going on, and then make the proper decision and make the next best play regardless of result. And I thought L just was very, very decisive is the word. And that helped him tonight. And, 22 points on 9 and 15 and I thought he hit some very valuable threes when it was shaky and got us some points that we needed. And, 3 of 7 is acceptable from distance. And he was shooting them, most of them on the baseline where they were more like the regular 3-point line than the extended 3-point line too. But yeah, L's going to be a player for the next 2 years that we're all going to be very happy. I'd like to say something too about Devante's body language, which you mentioned it before you got into L. I thought his body language was fantastic tonight, and that's been a problem too. I saw him give a very nice slap of the hands when he was coming out of the game, and there are times when he was pulled from a game for whatever reason that it was sulky and body language. And I think all of that correlates to him playing better. I know you pointed out on in the open court, he struggled tonight, but I thought on the half court, his passing into the post, and sometimes you got to turn players loose. I wonder sometimes if we're too tight offensively, afraid to make a mistake, and so Devante's one of those that if he just doesn't try to hit the home run and maybe goes for a double or maybe a triple and just stops at third base and is a little less flashy, he'd be solid. But I thought his body language was part of the reason you may have seen that at the end of the game as well.
So let's talk about numbers, pick out a few stats here. I think let's talk about defense because Indiana gives up 1.014 points per possession. The St. Francis team is talented offensively. One of the things I talked about on Banner Monday is that, if they were going to make this a little more interesting than it needed to be, it was probably going to be because they made a bunch of threes, because they have some guys who can really get hot from three. You saw King really go off in the first half. Part of that was really good shot making by him. Part of it was lackadaisical on-ball defense by Rob Phinisee and Devante Green, especially given what we saw from them in person at Michigan State. I mean, that was on a completely different level. Now, I thought in the second half that got better. But overall, Andy, this is the third straight substandard game defensively for Indiana. Because when they really turn things around, and especially in the the Wisconsin game and in the Michigan State game, the defense, especially the perimeter defense, was just on point, almost all game. And from the Illinois game through the Rutgers game, against Ohio State, and here tonight, I guess really the fourth straight, substandard defensive game, Archie's going to be happy with the 17-point win and how they bounce back, but I really feel like he's going to watch this defensive performance and just be like, good Lord, guys, like we're supposed to be building a culture of defense here, and I'm happy we scored 89 points, but it was leaky. There was poor communication, poor rotations. And again, it got better in the second half, so you hope they can build on that. But I think a defensive performance like this, they probably get bounced in the second round. They've really got to try to get back to playing the tight, connected defense they were playing when they got this season turned around.
Yeah, there were a couple stretches. I mean, really at the beginning, the first few possessions of the game were bad. Then they went through a stretch where they gave up, 6 points over the course of 14 possessions, which is pretty good. Then they just were horrendous at the end of the first half. Part of that aided a little bit by the free throws, but again, I think they gave up 27 points in the last 9 minutes of the first half after having given up 13, I think, in the first 11. And then they came out again in the second half and did really well to start. Gave up one basket over the first 8 possessions, and then I think 18 points through the first 25 possessions, which you would take. Most of those were 3-pointers. I think they hit 5 threes during that stretch, a 2-point layup early, and then a free throw mixed in. So they did well in those stretches. And then I think at that point they had, gotten ahead by enough, gave up a few baskets in a row. So it really ebbed and flowed. It felt like over the course of the game where there were stretches where they played relatively well. And I thought in the first half, while St. Francis did make some tough shots, they got some putbacks just on hustle plays and really chasing down offensive rebounds. Some of that is long rebounds from the number of 3-pointers that they were taking, but there were also times when IU didn't really do an effective job of boxing out, which against a team that has so little size to be able to give up, those are points you wouldn't expect to give up. And I think that's probably where his frustration would be the most. I thought there were times they struggled to really contain dribblers, but there are other times that they really did well at that. So it just was, I thought the defense was a little bit like the game where it felt like if they wanted to flip the switch, they could, and they did it in spurts, just not consistently enough. And that, lengthy defensive lapse toward the end of the first half is really what made it a close game and turned a 9-point lead into a 6-point deficit at halftime. That's a 15-point swing in the last 9 minutes of the half. That's that doesn't happen unless you're playing pretty poorly on the defensive end.
Yeah, and look, 4 blocks, 4 steals. When Indiana's playing well defensively, those numbers are higher. And that's just kind of a sign of, your non-active eyes, non-active feet and hands when, and that's just not good for Indiana. Obviously the free throw shooting. Oh, go ahead, Andy.
Just one other thing on defense. I mean, IU got 14 points off turnovers in the second half because they did a lot better job of forcing turnovers. And maybe fewer of those were of the live ball variety, but they did force turn 7 turnovers into 14 points in the second half. I thought they were just more intense there versus they had hardly any points off turnovers in the first half. So just to kind of underscore that defensive effort when it was there was productive and was good. It just wasn't there as long as it will need to be against better teams.
Yeah, and the
free throw defense was down today. We gave up 83.3% free throws. So
got to get back to that. Indiana 13 of 23 from the free throw line. I think, and a lot of those were early. I think Indiana I know they were 3 for their first 9. I don't know how bad it got after that, but just not a good free throw shooting night. And it's nice to see the turnovers only at 7. This, again, you're playing a defense that's not very good at forcing turnovers. It would have been nice to take care of the ball as well as they did tonight against Ohio State because some of those were just piss-poor turnovers they had against Ohio State really cost them. 18 assists, and, Coach, you mentioned the 6 from Devante Green. Rob Phinisee added 4. Between those two guys, 10 assists, 3 turnovers. You can win basketball games when the two guys that are handling the ball for you are doing that. So that was impressive. And then, here's a number that kind of jumps out to me, guys, which is, Indiana makes 6 3-pointers. It's all Al Durham and Devante Green. They're combined 6 for 15. The rest of the guys go 0 for 6. Good that Juwan Morgan didn't take any. This is the first time in a while that he hasn't. He really, went inside. Justin Smith only took 1. And again, I continue to believe part of the reason why Indiana's offense doesn't necessarily have to just fall through the floor next year without Romeo and Juwan, which a lot of people think is because you're going to have better shooters taking a higher percentage of your 3-pointers. And tonight, the percentage wasn't very good, because, Demezi couldn't make one and Fitzner missed and all that stuff. But having a higher concentration of your 3-point shooting in the hands of Devante and Al is a much better formula for actually using the 3-point line efficiently, which Indiana hasn't done this year.
Well, you look at the 2-point shooting percentage in the second half was 76%. They're 19 of 25 on 2s in the second half. So that tells you all you need to know about that. And I was actually surprised that they took 8 in the second half. I got a feeling a number of those came late if we look back at it. But that was really, in addition to the defense that we touched on, the kind of shot mix, shot selection, whatever you want to call it, in the first half was really poor. I think 13 of the 34 shots in the first half were from 3-point range. Just, again, against a team without a lot of size and against a team that you felt like you get the ball inside whenever you wanted, to settle for 13 3-pointers in the first half was just not what this team needed to do, and they rectified that in the second half. But yeah, I mean, you got Allen Devante shooting 40% from 3 and everybody else shooting 0. So that's somewhat telling, but I thought the shot selection was dramatically better in the second half, and that showed by shooting 78% or whatever, 76%, whatever it was in the second half on 2s.
Any other numbers, guys? Coach, any other numbers that jumped out to you?
As bad as the defense was, we held St. Francis to 37% shooting on the night, and they were, 38% from three, and they're capable of doing a lot of damage from three. And so, the concerning stat is getting them to the foul line 18 times and giving up 12 offensive rebounds. So stats don't always tell all of the truth. It was not a great defensive performance, especially in the first half. A lot better in the first 10 to 11 minutes. But, when this team decides to play, and that's just been the biggest thing. When this team comes to play, they can beat Wisconsin. They can beat Michigan State on the road without our best player. And it's just unbelievable, the ups and downs of the approach with this ball club. And, again, there's nothing they're doing intentionally necessarily. But, man, this team's pretty fun to watch when they can play as well as they possibly can play, and they just haven't been able to do it for close to 40 minutes. It's been a 24-minute ball club, and that showed up a little bit tonight, and luckily the opponent was such that didn't matter.
A couple other things I noticed stat-wise. The rebounding in the first half was pretty poor. You almost doubled up St. Francis on the glass in the second half, 23-12. So obviously there weren't a lot of offensive rebounds to go around for IU because they shot so well, and that explains part of that when you look at it as a percentage of misses and things like that. But again, I thought that was indicative of better effort level. And bench points, IU only had 8. Shorter rotation in some ways with Romeo out, but didn't get a whole bunch off the bench. Guard rebounding though was really good. You had Phinisee had 8, Devante had 5, Al had a couple, so that's 15 rebounds from your 3 starting guards. So that was pretty impressive for those guys. But you had all 5 starters with at least 9 points, and nobody else had more than 2. So a balanced effort at the top, but not a whole lot once you got down past the starters.
Yep. Coming up on the Assembly Call, we continue our breakdown of Indiana's victory over St. Francis. We'll talk a little bit more about the bench. Archie had some interesting comments about a guy off that bench who didn't play much in the second half. We'll talk about that. We got to talk some more about Justin Smith and a little more about Juwan Morgan as well. That's next here on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Catch us live immediately following every IU basketball game, plus every Thursday night at our website, assemblycall.com. And while you're there, make sure you sign up for our free IU Hoops email newsletter. Over 6,000 of your fellow IU fans are subscribed. We're getting closer to 7,000. So make sure you get on that. It'll make you a smarter and more well-informed IU basketball fan. I'm Jerod Morse. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and the coach, Brian Tonsoni. We're breaking down Indiana's victory over St. Francis. And guys, Andy, you talked about how the bench really didn't contribute tonight. And, I really thought this was a game where the bench would contribute because I thought Deron Davis would be able to come in and just dominate. I figured he would, against a team that didn't have much beef down low, that's so poor at defending twos, I thought he would just have a big game. And he came out and really didn't do much at all in the first half. He had that little fadeaway shot, that there was just no excuse for. And Seth Tower, intern, tweeted, Miller said Deron Davis didn't look very good in the first half and hadn't looked himself the last few days. He didn't see the court in the second half, partially because of that and partially because of Juwan Morgan's dominance. No, I don't know the full context of that. I don't know if he's suggesting that Deron was hurt or not feeling well, but he definitely didn't look good in the first half for whatever reason. And so on the one hand, again, this kind of goes to what we talked about earlier with Archie Miller. I thought he coached a good game. He called a good game. He did what he needed to do at halftime. I thought he shortened the bench, in the second half during the critical juncture, and that was good. I didn't think Deron deserved to play a whole lot in the second half, and he didn't. It's also, it's a little bit disappointing because Deron's been such a spark off the bench and has been such a kind of rock of maturity, I feel like, over the last maybe month of the season for the most part. And so to see him come out like that tonight, where you would hope that your upperclassmen set the tone, that's a little bit disappointing. So, hopefully, and I think he's going to be much more important in future games. Indiana didn't need him to win this game tonight, Andy, but, they're going to need him if they're going to keep going on in the NIT. So hopefully, whatever it is, he gets past quickly and is able to get back to being the Deron that we know and love.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly didn't set the world on fire in the first half. I didn't think he was terrible. Had a nice basket, cutting to the rim. Certainly the fall away jump shot against the size that St. Francis had is not the shot that you need there.
He was just flat, and a lot of the guys were flat. But
yeah, I would have been somewhat interested to see with everybody else picking it up a little bit in the second half. Does he do the same thing? But he definitely was. The same comments I'd make about him in the first half are probably the same ones I'd make about nearly everybody else. So I don't know that that's what he did in the first half was necessarily unique to him. I also don't think it was a great matchup in that sense. A team with not a lot of size, and if you're not going to just pound the ball inside to him, which they did not do, and which IU did not do in the first half, he's not doing you a whole lot by being out there because he's going to struggle a little bit defensively with some of the guys that he was having to guard, even though they're not the most skilled, just in terms of the type of player and the size of those players. So I agree with you. I think it'll be more important to see what he can bring later on. I think it'd be one thing if he just said he didn't look right in the first half, but I think the hadn't looked right in practice the last couple of days. Comment is a little bit telling where he's really been up and down just in terms of his health over the course of the year and his career, quite frankly. And while maybe it seemed like he had turned the corner there, down the stretch, perhaps that workload caught up to him a little bit. So I don't think a huge reason for concern. I just thought a lot of the guys, while there was opportunity to be had coming in off the bench, just didn't really seem ready to seize it. I thought Fitzner didn't play very well in the first half, played a lot better in the second when he was in. I thought Phinisee really looked unprepared when he was in the first half, just kind of came in and quickly took a 3-pointer from the top of the key, didn't really get in the flow of the game, and I didn't think he played particularly well. And it's similar to what we talked about with Al. Like, this is a good opportunity for Phinisee to be able to get out and play some minutes in this situation, particularly with Romeo out, and it just didn't seem like he was ready to step in and do that. And as a result, he didn't get in until later in the second half. McRoberts was the first guy off the bench in both halves. Had a good plus minus over the course of the game. Kind of surprisingly, I think was one of the better ones on the team, and had a few moments and hustle plays and things like that. But you can still see that he's just defensive mobility. From that standpoint, still really struggling with, I assume, the back injury and some of the things that have plagued him over the course of the year.
Coach, it was kind of an interesting night for Justin Smith. Andy, you texted me in the first half, something about how he was just kind of coasting through the game, and it certainly felt like that. What's interesting is that, I thought he looked better to me in the second half. Like, he looked more engaged as the entire team did. His stats were actually better in the first half. He had 6 of his points in the first half, 5 rebounds, had a couple of assists. So he actually acquired more numbers in the first half, but I thought his play overall was better in the second half. And I liked his approach, Coach, in terms of, not settling for 3-pointers, getting back to doing Justin Smith things, which is getting offensive rebounds and running the floor hard in transition. And there were opportunities for him to do that. And I think at times he gets maybe frustrated in games when he doesn't see those opportunities. But he's such a good finisher in transition. So it's nice to see him do that. And I hope, if he can kind of bottle that approach, we know he's such an X factor for this team. They're not going to make a deep run in the NIT without him really being the engaged guy that we saw against, Michigan State and in some of those games. So, his numbers were good tonight. Was it 10 points, 9 boards? But I thought even more than the numbers in the second half, his approach was just better.
His approach in the first half was really poor. And his approach in the second half was a lot better. Got some offensive rebounds that were key. Got out in transition, so it was good to see him bounce back. And it was indicative of the entire ball club a little bit. But here's the thing, and I go back to liking guys but not liking their play. You can't be a 50-50 guy, and when you play 28 minutes, 14 of them are a bad approach, and 14 when you're in the Big Ten. You cannot be a 4 or a power forward and not be able to shoot the basketball. Those things are going to have to be corrected. And if they do, Justin's got the athletic ability and the ability to guard to be a really important player going forward, not only in the NIT, but then in future years. But if you're a 50-50 guy where it's one game on, one game off, or one half on and one half on, and you allow the defense to do something totally different because of the inability to put the ball in the basket, that's going to continue to be a struggle for that young man. And we hope that he gets in the gym in the summer and develops at least a little bit of that. He is some, again, it's a body language thing. And I think if you've been around athletics long enough, you can tell good body language from bad body language. And it's frustrating as a coach and as a fan to see someone have a bad approach and bad body language for a half, and then need to have the coach get on people at halftime to come out and play a little bit better. As a sophomore in college, that's got to be fixed in order for him to maximize his obvious physical traits. And I know I've had people texting me the same thing about what's going on with him in the first half. And, it's a common theme now. And again, it doesn't take anything away from him as a person, but he's got to get better at those areas and have more, again, full games, not just halves.
Indy, a guy whose first half, second half splits really do, kind of tell the story and match what we saw. Rob Phinisee, who is such an important tone setter for this team. So it is no surprise that he really struggled in the first half, and Indiana did 2 points, 1 of 6 from the field, only had 1 assist. In the second half was just much more productive, much more efficient, as he scores 7 points, 3 of 3 from the field, had 6 rebounds, 3 assists, was just all over the place, and was, kind of extending his defense, playing some of the defense that we had seen from him. And look, I mean, that's, those two guys right there, Justin Smith and Rob Phinisee, were so important in the stretch when Indiana turned it around. And then you think back to that Ohio State game, who were the guys that just could not get going in that game? Justin Smith and Rob Phinisee. They make this team so much different, and obviously they are young guys. They're still kind of feeling their way in college basketball. This is a matchup that Rob really should have dominated, and he came out in the first half and I thought was a little bit passive. But then in the second half, everybody kind of, that approach that Juwan Morgan really led with, it became contagious. And I thought Rob especially played a lot better. And when he plays like that, he just adds a dimension that Indiana doesn't have without that, and that they desperately need. And, again, as he goes from a freshman to becoming a sophomore, is going to become so important for Indiana to lean on. He has to be more consistent. And these last 2 games, you've kind of seen the ups and downs with him that you'll sometimes see from freshman point guards. But as he gets more consistent, we all know he's going to become a really good player.
Yeah, I was surprised to look back at the stats and see that he shot the ball 6 times in the first half. He took the 1-3, which was pretty early, and all 5 of the others I feel like were pretty close to the basket, just couldn't finish. And but he was definitely more aggressive defensively, thought really pushed the ball, and was more I guess was smarter about the drives that he did take, not just because he made those shots, but there was the one where it's him in the open floor and he just kind of blew by everybody and got to the rim and finished there. He seemed more into the game at that point. And, I don't know what the issue would have been with him in the first half, but he only played the 13 minutes. And I think Archie, he was the first guy to come out of the game. Don't know whether he saw something with him early that he didn't really like. And, but glad he could turn it around and play well in the second half, because, 6 rebounds in the half, 3 assists, as you said, in addition to the 7 points was really good, and just see more in control of the offense. And, I do think it's a little bit of an adjustment trying to figure out, as you watch some of these guys, with Romeo not in there, trying to figure out how, these 3 guys in the backcourt haven't been together on the court together a lot of the time. And so I don't know if that was a case where Rob's trying to kind of feel out what, he's doing versus what Devante's doing in that scenario, or something like that. But he definitely played much better in the second half. And again, he's a guy that should benefit a lot from getting a couple extra games and these extra practices, especially given the time that he missed earlier in the season. So good to see him take advantage of that in the second half.
By the way, good point made, Chat Mob. Coach, I want to get your thoughts on this from Patrick Stevens. Says Justin Smith would excel if we had a team that could spread defenses. He's an effective cutter and can crash the boards. That's his bread and butter. Also a solid defender. And, there's a good point there. I mean, defenses have been so bogged down on him. A lot of his open opportunities have come with him getting the ball 15 to 20 feet from the basket and space between him and the defender. And that's not a good place for him to be, because it leads to him doing the 2 things he struggles with in the half court, which is taking jump shots and dribbling. When there's space and he can cut, when he can get in transition, when he can get those offensive rebounds, think about why he was so effective in those Michigan, in the Michigan State games. Well, when Indiana's making threes and then the whole team is crashing the boards, he seems much more in the flow of the game. So I think that's a really good point. And if Indiana, again, can use the three-point line more efficiently next year, which I think we will, because just the character of the offense, the personality of the offense will change with the personnel that we have, I can see a path to where he can be more effective in that kind of an offense with what they're going to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think offense is designed to be spaced out, and teams have not allowed that to happen because of our lack of shooting at many spots. Romeo's 27% and Justin's, only hit a few shots. And so the whole defense is compacted even more. And so, yes, the thing I would say, I obviously, if there were shooters, there's more space to drive. Look what Illinois did when they came out and pressured Indiana and got into denial passing lanes. They were late to help, and we were able to slice and dice that for a lot of points. Tonight's defense was not there. As you rotated the ball, we were able to drive. We were able to get the ball inside. The defense allowed itself to get spaced, those two, just by strategy. And that helped Indiana's offense to some of their higher offensive points. That'll happen when we put shooters around, and Justin will be better when there's shooters around. The point I'll make about Justin, though, is college basketball, you usually have 4 shooters on the floor and a mobile 5 who could sometimes also hit. And as you watch the NIT and the NCAA, the game is about putting the ball in the basket and then being able to drive. And I think, he's got to develop a threat too. But yes, if we added 2 or 3 shooters, his game would be elevated. I agree with that comment.
Andy, anything on that or any other storylines? Obviously, we're going to talk Juwan and game balls because, spoiler alert, Juwan's getting the game ball, I think, tonight. Anything else you want to hit here before we go to that?
No, I don't really think there's too much else. I thought Justin had, talking about him, I thought some of the offensive rebounds he had in the second half were just good effort plays and being in the right spot and the kinds of plays that he can really make when he's playing well.
Yep.
I'd like to add a little bit. It takes point guards. We've been blessed with Phinisee this year, but think how good he's going to be as a junior. Look at the guards up in Michigan and Michigan State. Xavier Simpson was hailed when he came in and struggled a little bit early, had a good, okay freshman year, but now he's fantastic. Cassius Winston, the same thing, was behind a couple guards at Michigan State, and Izzo was mad at him. And then all of a sudden now everyone's I think we got that kind of guy hopefully next year, but even junior and senior year, that and you got to allow a young man. When we had the off-season talk, we said Phinisee's going to come in and be a backup point guard. He's going to play well at times. He's not really been allowed or put in a position to have freshman struggles, and so I think you see that, like in the first half, is him finding the new guys, and that was a little bit of struggle. And then
because we can't overcome them. I mean, we lose if he struggles.
He is so vital. And then the other thing with him is that he had a month off, and that usually you have 6-7 months in season to develop. He had a month off, and then had to spend another month getting back into condition, which is an abnormal for development. So for me, there's a little more patience with the up and down play recently of a Phinisee than someone who hasn't gone through that and is in year 2.
That's a great point. I mean, sometimes you get the really elite point guards that can come in and be really solid from day one. But, Yogi started from day one, but he didn't really come into his own until his junior year. I mean, he struggled as a freshman. That sophomore year was a disaster, and his role was, a lot different. And then he felt more comfortable as a junior. Think about Tom Coverdale, who barely got off the bench as a freshman, and was able to kind of learn through those years. And things obviously changed in the program, and then he got more of an opportunity. But yeah, you do have to be patient with point guards, and that's a good point, Coach, because it's easy to forget that sometimes when we get so excited about him and want him to be an all Big Ten player right now. And when he plays like that, we win. But you're going to go through some ups and downs. I mean, as we've been saying, we have relied so much this year on a backcourt that's included 2 freshmen and a sophomore. I mean, unless they're all 5-star guys, you're just going to be inconsistent. And even if they are, you're probably going to be inconsistent. You got to get old and stay old, especially in the front court especially in the back court in this game. And Indiana's on that path. It feels like it's taken a while to get there, but we are at least on that path. All right, coming up in our final segment, we're going to hand out our game ball, spend some time talking about Juwan Morgan. Then we will hit some other storylines we haven't hit yet. There's kind of a surprising result happening right now in that Arkansas-Providence game. Talk about that in last call. That's coming up next. You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I am Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and the coach, Brian Tonsoni, wrapping up our breakdown of Indiana's victory over St. Francis. Ryan Phillips could not be here. He's got a work trip this week. But he did text us some thoughts, so I do just want to give you Ryan's thoughts here on this game because no episode of the Assembly Call is complete without Ryan's thoughts, and it's much better to do this now because it's just reading off some text messages. You're not handing him the microphone and then 6 minutes later getting a chance to respond. Ryan says, solid win, happy with it. From what I could watch on the plane once they woke up, it was easy. A lot of missed layups early, likely means a lack of focus, egged on by a lack of atmosphere. Once they got the blood going at the half, it was fine. I'm sure Ryan was disappointed in the start time. These odd 7 o'clock Eastern start times, probably really affected both teams. So anyway, those are
just one of the teams, only one.
Come on, dude.
No, you come on. Okay, let's hit our game ball. I'll go first. I'm going to give it to Juwan Morgan. And I think it's a pretty obvious choice in this case. I mean, his overall numbers speak for themselves. 28 points, 8 rebounds. He set the tone early in the second half with Indiana down 6. He was 10 of 13 from the field. And frankly, the 3 that he missed, he should have made all of them. Like, it was probably as lackadaisical and kind of carefree as we've ever seen from Juwan in that first half. And that's why he missed those 3 shots. You give those shots back and he does what he usually does with a Wilson ball, which is get over 30 points, and he's, perfect from the field. So I thought in this game, Indiana ebbed and flowed as Juwan ebbed and flowed, and he didn't play very well in the first half. He was outstanding in the second half, and that really led to Indiana's comeback. So I think you can make some arguments for honorable mention, and feel free to do that, guys. But I think Juwan is the pretty clear game ball recipient tonight. And I will throw in an honorable mention to Archie Miller for all the reasons I mentioned earlier, because I thought he called a good game. Andy, your game ball.
Yeah, I would go with Juwan as well. As you said, sit back and 21 points in the second half. I think had both IU made a concerted effort to get him the ball in the first half, and had he taken better advantage of the opportunities he had around the basket, I mean, he could have pushed for 40. I mean, I think anytime they wanted to get him the ball, he could have got it and scored, given the competition and where he was able to typically set up from a positional standpoint. So I thought really. While everybody went into the locker room with a pretty bad taste in their mouth, I thought he was really the catalyst when they came out of the locker room. They made a point to get him the ball. They did. He responded and played well once he got it. So I thought that was really important. Al will be the guy that I would mention as the honorable mention, career high, 22 points, and really, again, going back to what we talked about, thought he did a great job taking advantage of the additional shots and the additional possessions that he ended up being able to use with Romeo out, and dependent upon how quickly or if Romeo is able to come back, I think you're going to see more of that from Al, because the backcourt already didn't have a ton of depth, and without Romeo, that gets a little bit more shallow. But a good opportunity for Al to really keep the momentum going that he had over the course of the year, and as we head into what will be his junior season. Coach, game ball.
I think I have to go, with Morgan as well. 8 of 11 from the free throw is really nice to see from Juwan, and it's going to be much needed as teams will be following him here in the next couple of games. The honorable mention, L has to be up there. And again, I know maybe I'm just correcting my past, but really pleased with Devante's approach. He's never going to be perfect. He's going to give up drives, and he's going to be sloppy on alley-oop passes and all that kind of stuff. But I think he was aggressive, and he was into the game for the right reasons. And I know I've caught some grief on Twitter about, it's an old man's comment about playing for Indiana, and it's not what kids do this day. But I still hold out hope for the fact that kids want to come to a school and play for a school and win for a school, and then their development is part of that as well. And I don't apologize for wanting that. And Devante seems to have had a conversation with Archie, or at least had to listen to Archie or something 5 or 6 games ago. And the young man has really done a nice job. And, if you're going to be a bald coach in some basement near Lafayette complaining about him for 25 games, you might as well find a way to really thank him for showing up here the last 5 or 6, and hope that is a lesson learned and continued. So honorable mention to Devante for just being what he can be, and I just wanted to mention that again, because I think that's such a vital part of the wins lately.
Yeah, he didn't shoot well tonight. He was 4 of 13, 3 of 8 from downtown, but he played well. There's that difference. And in some ways, and this may be kind of a crazy comment, in some ways he played better tonight than he did against Ohio State. Like, remove the shooting. The shooting was unreal. So overall, you would take that performance, but some of the turnovers were bad. Some of the defense was bad. So, scoring is such you got to take the scoring. You would take the production. But just in terms of play and approach, I think you could make the argument that it was actually better tonight. He just didn't make the shots that he did against Ohio State. So, and that's a thing with him. So it'll be interesting to see if he can get more consistent with that. So Arkansas is up by 11 at the half over Providence, which is interesting. The Gaffordless Razorbacks. Do you guys have a preference? Would you rather play Arkansas without Gafford? And obviously, when most people listen to this, will know the result of it. But yeah. I mean, this is usually when we preview. Do you have anything to say about either one of those opponents?
Is he sitting out because of the NBA, or is he hurt?
No, it's NBA.
Yeah, I would probably rather play them. I mean, I know they had a few other good young guys there as well, but I think that feels like I just think Ed Cooley's a really good coach at Providence and got some tough guys typically, and they've been up and down, but have shown some ability to really come out and play well in some of the Big East games they had. They were not really on the bubble. They were kind of there for a little while. Certainly more so than I ever felt that Arkansas was, who had a couple good wins, but probably not helping Providence that they're shooting a cool 0 for 11 from 3-point range in the first half of that game.
Here's the other thing too. When you have a star like that's out, you can rally the troops, and sometimes the first game is the best time to rally the troops, and then all of a sudden the second game you miss them a little bit more and can be taken advantage of, especially if you have 2 road games in a row in that situation. And hopefully Romeo is able to come back from his injury and play. Maybe not if it's a 2-day turnaround Thursday. Friday would be a better game time for that to happen. And maybe we've seen the last of Romeo as well, if it's a lingering situation, and we just got to go with that right now. But I think I'd rather play Arkansas.
So schedule-wise, we don't know when this game will be played because the second-round NIT games can be anywhere from March 21st through the 25th, I think. So there's a wide range, but it did kind of slip on the broadcast that Indiana would play Thursday night. So obviously that's when we normally do Assembly Call Radio. So we would the post-game show would be our show for that night. If they play at a different time, then we'll do Assembly Call Radio Thursday night, and then the post-game show whenever it happens. Interesting to see what kind of live listenership there is when there's also NCAA tournament games going on. But our audience is awesome. We got a lot of people watching live right now, and so we anticipate that a lot of you would be here with us because you're great. Also, there's a nice little side conversation in the chat mob, as always happens late in these shows, about what airline Ryan is going on, and they named an airline called Ryanair and talked about how it's a terrible airline and it only serves Lucky Charms. And there's a great quote from Aaron, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on this, who says, "The real Ryan is a good guy, but very punchable and teasable." Punchable and teasable are those adjectives that you'd say are accurate adjectives to describe Ryan.
Feels like a trap.
It's completely ridiculous.
I do like to give him a hard time. I think anybody obviously knows that. We definitely gave him a hard time when we were all together. The teasable part for sure. I don't know that I've ever wanted to punch him. At least now we were hanging out in person. Maybe sometimes on the show.
I would end up punching my computer. So
yeah, but in person, I don't know that I've ever felt that. But
no, not in person. Not in person. No, he's great, and he'll be back next week. So if there's shows next week, he'll be back. But off doing some work stuff, gentlemen. Anything else you want to discuss? Do you guys have any updates on where you're now ranked in the bracket matrix after the results are in? Has that been updated yet? Or are we still awaiting?
I think it's not till tomorrow, I want to say. I think he said it'd be updated on Wednesday.
We're knocked off the pedestal.
You guys aren't going to be number one anymore? You got to get back?
No, we're gonna be down the rankings.
Are you going to go in and do a little Bobby Knight speech for your guys? Tell them, you will not put me in that position again. I had to sit around in 20th place in this freaking league.
No, the guys.
If you're not going to seed correctly.
Yeah, that's what it was. We had 67 to 68. We just made more one seed line choices than correct choices this year. We were like 7 off of our average. We averaged about 44 correct in the first 3 years. We only had 37 correct, and we made 2 big decisions late involving 6 teams. I mean, late like Thursday night when we had our big meeting, and all 6 of those missed by 1 seed. If we'd have left them alone, we would have had 12 more points and been close to the 350 mark where we had been. So when I talked to the kids, they were all shocked and hurt and embarrassed and where we ended up. And I said, gentlemen, we were just a couple of decisions flipping a coin from being back to where we were. So the process was great. The support is great. Our Twitter followers are great. Thank you, Jerod, for the pizza on Sunday, and Andy has always been great as well. So yeah, we're going to be knocked off the pedestal a little bit, and maybe that's good for us to
be hungry again.
To be hungry again.
Hungry again.
There's a lot of people that do a lot of good stuff and a lot of great bracketologists. There's a huge interest now, so, and a lot more information, and you know what got us the recognition. We stuck to our criteria, and the committee changed a little bit too. They went away from just raw wins a little bit to some other things, and so we learn and move on from here.
Libby Torfey said in the chat, Fish said in his sign-off, it could be either Thursday or Friday. So we will just await word on when the next game is. Andy, anything else that you want to say before we get to last call?
No, I don't think so. I'm proud that we've gotten this much out of an NIT game, so good for us.
Yes, very, very good for us. You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Remember that because you're an Assembly Call listener, you get 15% off your entire order at HoosierProud.com and HomefieldApparel.com. So if you want officially licensed IU gear, go to HomefieldApparel.com. And if you want one of our Assembly Call logo t-shirts or one of Hoosier Proud's unique Indiana-inspired designs, visit HoosierProud.com. On both sites, use the promo code ASSEMBLY at checkout for 15% off your entire order. All right, guys, time for last call. Final thoughts, Andy. Why don't you go first?
We talked about this on Sunday evening, and just about this game in particular probably wouldn't tell us a whole lot about this team's mindset going in just because of what the opponent was. I think that largely, proved to be true. The second half certainly showed that when IU really asserted itself, they could score almost whenever they wanted. And I think what we saw from this team was pretty reflective of what we've seen from them over the course of the season. And so, in that regard, I don't know that we learned a whole lot about this team, which is probably relatively telling given that it was game 34 or whatever it was. But a solid win, a good to see Juwan really take charge in the second half. And, as much as anything, excited to see Al Durham play so well, excited to see that second half from Rob Phinisee, Devante playing a good game. Again, I think for most people, this is, while there's a little bit of, hey, let's enjoy watching this team play a little bit more, there's also a pretty big eye on the future and on next season as to what that's going to look like, because as you've talked about, the kind of goodwill and positive momentum that was evident at this time or close to this time last season isn't really there now, given how the season's played out and those kinds of things. So for me, it's as important as anything to look at things that might be telling for what will happen next year. And I thought in tonight's game, there were some positive things in that regard. So that's a good thing. And hopefully this team got some of the initial disappointment and got over the hump of that and can just play. I think Duran said something after the game where, they're, really want to be able to win it and wants to know that everybody's, kind of going at it from that mindset. So hopefully that's true. And we'll see whenever the next game is, how they're able to, build on this game. And again, kind of hopefully get past some of the initial disappointment and just be able to come out and play.
Coach?
I'm going to go away from the X and O's a little bit. And Indiana basketball is so special, and there's an opportunity for people to go see the game tonight. And Martha the Mop Lady Twitter handle and whoever's behind that was making some arrangements for people to donate tickets for people who can't afford or haven't been able to go. And I think I at the last track, there was 17 or 18 people that maybe couldn't buy a ticket or two and take a youngster. To me, that is part of Indiana basketball. It's probably part of a lot of programs across the country. That's the good side. We get wrapped up so much in winning and losing and the negative tweets and the social media that's really bad out there. But there's some good parts, great parts, mostly to Indiana athletics. And I'm really proud to be part of a school and a fan base that sometimes gets a bad rap. But whoever's responsible for that website and getting people into Assembly Hall to appreciate Indiana basketball, That's what we all need to rally around and have more of and support the guys. And like I said, like them, be critical, love them, whatever you want. But that's Indiana basketball to me. And I hope those 18 people walk away tonight with just a great memory of their first time in Assembly Hall. And I just wanted to make sure that was heard by our listeners.
Yeah, so now we look ahead to a second-round game in the NIT. You know, I think as Coach mentioned earlier, these tournaments, you got to get through that initial, kind of just part where you're kind of getting comfortable, and the guys probably had to get over the disappointment of not making the NCAA tournament. Now hopefully we've broken our tournament sweat, and we're really, really ready to get in here, because as long as we're going to be in this tournament, let's make a run. Let's go to New York and see if we can win this thing. Obviously, got to win the next game first. We'll see if Romeo's able to play. I haven't had a chance to look at all the Twitter comments or all the post-game press conference comments from what I'm reading in the chat mob. It sounds like Romeo hasn't really done much on the basketball court since the Big Ten tournament. That the back has really been bothering him. So, as I said before, we have no reason to not give him the benefit of the doubt that he wants to play and that he will play if he's healthy. Obviously, we'd all love to see him back, but we all, we don't want him to play if he's not healthy. So hopefully he can get healthy, and hopefully this team plays long enough, that he's able to get healthy, get him back out there at least one or two more times in an Indiana uniform. But, overall tonight, I'm pleased with what the team was able to do. That first half was bad, and, if we haven't spent a ton of time talking about the first half. If you want to relive it at all, you could watch it. I certainly wouldn't do that, but go listen to the halftime report. Starkly different tone than what we've had here, and I think that was warranted after what the guys did in the second half, because the way Indiana played in the first half, it wasn't acceptable. It was bad. But to a certain extent, it was understandable, kind of given some of the circumstances. And so, if you can come out and then dominate by 20-some points and take care of business in the second half, you can overlook it a little bit, assuming that it kind of propels you forward and you start playing better in these future games. So, Indiana, because of the opponent and just, I think, the talent level difference, Indiana was able to get a little bit of a mulligan for their first half. They took advantage of it and were able to play well in the second half. And now we hope that they will carry that momentum forward, and that we'll get a good performance in the next round of the NIT whenever that game is. Obviously, we'll send out some tweets whenever we find out about it, and we will look forward to talking to you on the postgame show after that game. But that'll do it for us on this edition of the Assembly Call IU postgame show. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. And you can also subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Thank you for listening. We'll be back to talk IU hoops again with you, certainly on Thursday night, either for AC Radio or the postgame show. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
All right. My wife just walked in and mouthed, "Are you guys still talking?" Yes. Yes. An hour plus on an NIT game.
Somehow the answer to that question is who knows? All right. Well, I guess then it'll be after they figure out who wins that game tonight, and then they'll announce the game time. I mean, Thursday feels like an awfully quick turnaround to have somebody else travel to there.
Advantage Indiana.
I know, but yeah, that just seems. I didn't remember the NIT even having games that would go up against the NCAA tournament, though. But
yeah, I don't either. Another great comment from Patrick. Somewhere Ryan is asking, "Are we still on the air?"
So the podcast is off.
Yeah, the podcast is off. We ended the podcast a long time ago.
So we're just.
Oh man.
Oh boy. Yeah,
yes, the podcast is off. Okay, so real quick. You guys have your NCAA tournament brackets filled out. Oh, and for everybody listening, go to assemblycall.com/bracket2019 to join the bracket challenge. I know Delphi Bracketology has one that you can join too. So join those bracket challenges on ESPN. What is we'll just do a quick final four picks before we get out of here, if you have them. If you guys have even looked at a bracket since.
It's funny. I don't have one filled out, and I feel like the more that I've done bracketology, I certainly will. It just takes me a little bit to actually sit down and do it, because the other part is about this, and this is the one thing that has helped you ever since I did this, was you feel like you you know a lot about these teams, so you can talk yourself into or out of virtually any game that's there. So I usually try to give myself a couple days. So I have not filled out very much at all. I've some of the first round games on one. I think I started the other night, and then I just put it down and did something else. So
okay, so Andy doesn't have a Final Four yet. Coach,
I think it's. I have, but I was like, I took a 4-hour nap after school yesterday and crashed. And I really did not want to look at a bracket for a while after spending, months and stuff. But I think Duke's got a real easy path. I think Texas Tech is going to be my surprise. I'm banking on defense, although, defensive teams sometimes get swallowed up in the tournament. I just have a feeling that Chris Beard will find a way to win some games in that. I think North Carolina will come out on the other side, and I have Tennessee. So Tennessee, North Carolina, and Duke and Texas Tech, and I think it's going to be a Duke, North Carolina number 4, as much as I'd rather see other teams play. And I think North Carolina upsets them.
Yeah, my bracket was pretty boring. I've got all 4 number 1 seeds going to the Final Four, and I'm picking Virginia. And I was kind of feeling like I was going to pick Virginia all year just because I feel like they're going to be a team on a mission once they get to the tournament. I may live to regret that. Maybe there's a little secret wishful thinking of hoping a team kind of playing that defensive style can do something in the tournament. But I'm going with them over Duke in the final. Close game, but that's who I'm going with. So.
I did pick one based on the coaches I either liked or respected. And when you get to the Midwest, it's like NCAA probation city. If you look at or scandal city in the Midwest. So when you get a chance, look at the Midwest bracket. You got Samson in there. You got North Carolina academic scandal. You got Kansas, I believe, is in there. If you moved Louisville down there, you'd really be have a bracket of NCAA violators. Hard time picking that bracket, Coach.
By the way, last thing I'll just say before we sign off here, thank you to everybody. We hit our goal for the donation drive, so we've never actually gone all the way to the final day that we've set. We hit it long before. So again, thank you, everybody who donated for your generosity. It always blows us away, and we really appreciate it, and it makes a huge, huge difference. So thank you very much for that. And that's all we got.
I think that's it. So, all right. Well, we'll figure out the schedule once we know about the game. And
enjoy the first 4, and then have fun Thursday. It's the best time of the year.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
I'll be off.
It'll be a lot better when we're back involved in it on Thursday through Sunday.
But that would be much better.
Yes.
Definitely.
Much better. I hate listening to the bracket breakdown shows when we're not in it. It's painful. I always I listen to 10 minutes of them, then I turn it off because it's I can't do this. Yeah. All right, everybody. Talk to you all Thursday.
Good night.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Yep.